Hey everyone, it is Whitney from the White House on the Square, and today I'm going to do a quick little tutorial on prepping a piece of furniture for paint. A lot of paints out there that will tell you that you do not need to do any prep work in which to paint. There's always some prep work involved when you're painting a piece of furniture. It's the amount of prep work that you're doing. At the very, very least, you need to give a really good cleaning so that there's no grease or grime or dust on. In a lot of cases, I always recommend giving it a good sanding. I call it a scuff sanding. It's not something, you don't have to take it down to bare wood or anything, but you really just kind of want to get it really nice and scuffed up so that the paint has something to adhere. I haven't picked the paint that I'm using for this piece quite yet, but I know that I'm going to go white. So what I'm going to do is do videos on each step of the process till I get to the finished product. So today it's prepping. So I've already wiped this down once because it had a lot of grime on it and a lot of dirt. I wanted to get some of that off before I started sanding, because what you could potentially do is when you're sanding, you get that dirt into your wood grain, which then would affect the adhesion of your paint. So I always recommend giving it a cleaning before you actually sand it, and then you give it a final cleaning. That's pretty much the process that I use. What I want to do is take off the hardware. I already took off the one side, so I just need to take off this side. So as you can see, this had a plate, and then it had this piece over top of it. I think it makes it just a little too ornate. I'm going to take this from a very traditional mid-century looking piece, more of a farmhouse piece, modern farmhouse piece. And I don't think that I'm going to use the plates, but we're going to talk about that and filling the holes. And I think I'm going to just give these a good cleaning. Usually what I do is I have a baggie handy, and I'll put all of my pieces in a baggie, but I happen to have this piece of plastic from some packaging, so I'm just going to stick it in there for now. Alright, so I've removed the hardware. I've given it an initial cleaning. So there's different grits of sandpaper. 80 is on the coarser side. That's usually what I start with. You can actually get more coarse sandpaper grits, but usually 80, 120, and 220 are usually the grits that I use when I am sanding down a piece of furniture. And the good thing about when you're hand sanding versus using a sander, an electric sander or a battery operated sander, is that it's harder to adjust the pressure because they kind of have a mind of their own. So when you're hand sanding, you have a little bit of control over how aggressively you sand. So today I do have 80 grit here. I'm not going to use a lot of pressure on it. And then I have the sanding block, which is going to be great for some of the larger surfaces. And then I have the sanding pad, and that's really going to help me get into the grooves because this has a lot of detail on the front of this, and it's really going to let me get in there. So let's get started. Now what I'm going to do is, even though I'm using the same hardware, I'm not using the plate that was behind the hardware, so I'm going to need to fill in one of these holes. So if you're switching out the hardware, this is what you're going to want to do if the holes don't match up. And so you really need to keep that in mind. If you are replacing the hardware, do the holes match up? Do you need to wood fill them? Are you going from handles to knobs? So things like that's when it helps to have a vision for your piece. Worst case scenario here, I've filled my wood holes and then I don't like it without the plate, and I'll have to go back and re-drill the hole for the plate, but I'm thinking I want to try to do it without, so I think it'll just make it look a little more dainty. So I like this, I do two different things when I'm filling holes. One is I do like this plastic wood. It's a DAP product, and because I'm painting it, it doesn't matter what color I'm using. I do have darker woods, so I could do that if I wanted to. The key with this is it's very porous, so if I do wood fill, I usually go back and hit it with just a little bit of shellac to kind of even out the tone before I paint it. But I will get to that in a bit. I do also use Bondo. Bondo dries really fast, and for someone like me who doesn't typically have a lot of patience, it's a great product. It's very smelly. I'm not working outside today, so I am going to just use this. The thing of it is I'm just going to have to be patient and let this dry, which I can do that today because I have other things to do. So I just have this little plastic spackle. If you You could use a plastic knife or whatever you wanted, and then you just fill your hole. Sometimes I'll put a piece of painter's tape behind the hole if I'm worried that I'm pushing this through too far. So, because I don't need it to go through the whole way. The goal here is that there would be a little slight bubble where the hole is, and then when you sand it down, it would be nice and even. Sometimes it won't be, you won't have enough of a bubble, and you'll have to go back and just hit it with the wood filler just one more time. The goal here is that you should be able to sand it down and that it should be completely smooth. So there you go. I basically have this piece ready to paint. The wood fill for the hardware will need to dry, so I'm gonna let that dry. I will come back and sand it, and once it's ready for paint, I will do another video. So if you want to follow along, if you found this to be helpful, if you'd kind of like to see the progress of this project and other projects, hit subscribe.